Welcome back, my brave and beautiful humans, to another episode of Soul Hygiene. I am really happy to have my new friend, Mr. Chris, on with us today. He owns the Parsons, I wrote this down, Parsons Project Ministries in his town. And he has such a wonderful story of God's forgiveness and just how God has touched his life and where he is now. And he's turned his whole life around. Now he's helping everybody else and helping people who are also addicted. So I can't wait for you to hear his story. We'll probably have to do a two-parter, I told him, because he has a lot to unpack. But we've kind of talked a little bit, and I'm going to let him just talk for a little while, and then we'll give you some information, possibly how you can give to his nonprofit. But we will get there, and he'll tell you a little bit about that as well. So good evening, Mr. Chris. How are you doing?
How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
First, I'd first like to say, thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, of
I
course.
love sharing about what God's done for me, and how far He's brought me in just a very short amount of time. I think that's the biggest takeaway I want to give everybody on this is that through obedience, through faith, and just being open to allowing God to use you as a vessel, you'll be amazed by the things that you can get done. You
Yeah.
know, um, so I grew up in a little small town called Bellbrook, Ohio. I was born August 8th, 1976, and I had one older half sister from my dad's first marriage, and then I had a younger sister from that was from my mom and dad's marriage. Um, growing up, we were kind of like the Leave It to Beaver family, and my dad worked a lot, but after about 15 years, my parents had separated, and during that time, I was about 10 years old, and I had suffered with ADD, attention deficit disorder. I was on Ritalin from the age of 5 all the way up until 10, and then the doctors took me away, took it away from me, right around the same time that my parents had divorced, and that just set me on a spiral. I remember my first drink of alcohol was around 11 years old. I stole 2 cans of beer and from a store and brought them home, and I remember just drinking that first one and just that warm chemical hug that it gives you, just letting you know that life ain't so bad, that that's always going to be there, and that's what I turned to. A couple of years later, my mom met my stepfather, who was a great guy. I mean, I absolutely loved the guy, but he was also a severe alcoholic. He was like that Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type, so he would get intoxicated and then put hands on me every once in a while. Um, so this just sent me into a lot of drinking, a lot of heavy drinking. Drugs come about around 15 years old. When I was 18, I got caught breaking into my parents' house. I stole a couple of guns and their cash box. That eventually got me into prison. I did 3 years in prison. While I was in prison, that's the first time I ever found the Lord. I grew up in a Christian family. My grandmother and grandfather always had me in church. My grandmother was an organist, and she was just. I never remember a time that she didn't have the Bible in front of her, or she wasn't in prayer. But I never knew who her God was. So when I was in prison, I was having a Bible study on an inmate's rack, and that's the first time that I ever felt the Holy Spirit move. So I kept reaching out to my stepfather, trying to get him. He eventually got sober. He went into the AA program, and he was just so upset with me because he was finally able to get it and understand it and experience what sobriety was, and I just couldn't get it. You know, so he was showing tough love the whole 3 years that I was in prison. He wouldn't have no contact with me at all. Um, and I kept trying to reach out to make an amends to him, because I found the Lord, and it was about 2 months before I got out. I got called up to the captain's office, and I was told that my stepfather was in the hospital, and he wasn't going to make it, and he ended up passing. They allowed me to go to the funeral, but they only allowed me to go by myself. I wasn't allowed to have no family or nothing there. So I sat in front of his casket for a half an hour, experiencing all those emotions, and then I had to go back to prison, and they put you on a 72-hour hold, and so that's when I lost contact with God. I got angry at him. I got angry bad. I mean, when I hit the streets, for the next 20 years, it was like devastation. I ended up getting into methamphetamine the last 15 or 20 years of my addiction. Um, And I can tell you, I mean, I was selling in large quantities. I had all kinds of money, but I could never fill that void. There's always something that I could just never, you know, it got so bad that, I ended up I had a daughter when I was 19, and my mother was stuck raising her pretty much all of her life. Um, when she was about 12 years old, I had made a hard choice that, I seen that my addiction was holding my family hostage, and I decided to cut ties with them, and I wouldn't see him again for another 16 years. So, like I said, during that time, I did a lot of selling of drugs and just a lot of partying. I mean, I don't think there was ever a day that I was sober. Um, so the last 5 years of my addiction, I spent homeless. My girlfriend had cheated on me, and it just broke me. I hated the person that I become, so I did everything I could to punish myself. I ate out of dumpsters. I took showers in public water fountains. Um, just anything I could to humiliate myself. Because I just could not stand the person that I had become. During this time, gosh, I know I pulled my report, from the hospital, from just one hospital in our local area. 58 times in 7 years, I had been hospitalized, where I had my thyroid totally removed. There's all kinds of complications, overdoses, just, I mean, I was a mess, and I just couldn't die. It didn't matter what I tried to do, Um, so, like I said, I loved humiliating myself. My most favorite thing to do was panhandling. Just put myself out there in the public's eye and just unbathed. Just beaten up, and it was just the most humiliating thing that you could actually do. To get money. And so this lady, she was coming from church, and she had her daughter with her. She was 9 years old, and she stopped and asked me if she can give me a hotel room for the night, and I agreed, and she wanted me to get in her car with her and her kid, and I had my homeless buggy with me, my stroller with all my stuff, and I got drugs on me, and I explained to her, I said, I'm not getting in the car with you and your kid, that's dangerous. I said, I'm a drug addict, I'm homeless, and I said it's just unsafe. So she knew then that I had a kind heart, and so I agreed to walk over and meet her over there. She come out and handed me a room key and gave me $50 cash, and she explained that she got me a hotel room for a whole week. So it was supposed to get really bad. We ended up getting, I guess, I think it was like a foot of snow that year. Um, so the next day she picked me up and she took me out to get some hygiene, and took me out to eat. And that's when I realized what was wrong with her. She started sharing with me about God, and I started arguing with her. I did it in a kind way, but I pretty much told her that, you're one of these Jesus freaks. You done fell and bumped your head, because you don't know who you tried to save. I said, I've been homeless for the past 5 years. I'm a drug addict. I don't want to get clean. I was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. I had 40% or less of my heart functioning. They gave me 2 years or less to live if I continued going the way I was going. And congestive heart failure, it's dead heart muscle, and there's no way of reviving that. So it's a disease that progressively gets worse. And then I told her I ain't seen my family in 15 years. I just had all these lists of excuses why getting sober wasn't an option. And then putting God in the mix, that definitely wasn't no option because I didn't believe in him. And I was angry at him, And she listened to me when I was finally out of breath. She says, "Are you finished?" And I said, "Yeah." And she just, she had these nice, soft, angelic hands, and she just took my beat up, cracked, bleeding hands, and held on to them. And she told me, she says, "I love you, Chris, and Jesus loves you." She said, "Think of the testimony that you could share one day that would help change somebody else's life." And then she told me that I had one big elephant on my plate. There was only one way I could eat it, and it's one bite at a time. I wish I could say her sheer angelic beauty was enough to send me off to the first, treatment center, but it took me about another 3 months. But God started chasing me everywhere, although I wasn't seeing him. He started showing my family to me everywhere. My mom was a nurse in the hospital. My sister was an RTA bus driver. My dad was a homeless guy on the bench. He just kept showing them to me, except it wasn't actually my family. I kept hearing these words, go home, but it wasn't audible. But I just kept, I had that strong feeling. So I would be so far, I'd be so paranoid, from the methamphetamine use and from sleep deprivation, that downtown in Dayton, that's where I'm from right now, is Dayton, Ohio. Down at Riverscape, there's this big rock out in the middle of the river, and I'd be so paranoid. I used to wade out in the river to climb up on that rock get away from everybody. So that's the only comfort I ever allowed myself. I used to love to live, stay down by the river all the time when I was homeless. You know, so I ended up going to jail. I had 26 felonies. This is during the time of COVID. So I would walk around and I get caught with, a gram or pipe on me or whatever, and they would just give me a ticket, take my drugs, and then send me on my way. So these tickets kept turning into felonies, and eventually, landed me in jail. So while I was in jail, this inmate, he tried to lead me to the Lord, and I started arguing with him, and I like go back a minute. My sobriety date is April 3rd of 2021. So that's 4, 3, 2, 1. It's kind of like God already had this plan. Uh, so the inmate tried to lead me to the Lord, and I started arguing with him, and then he had like 30 books in his cell, and he asked me if I wanted anything to read, and I asked him if he had anything spiritual, but not the Bible. I don't believe in the Bible, and he handed me this book right here. It's called Whisper by Mark Batterson, and it's talking about God speaking to us. And so I got about halfway through that book, and there's this one part in there where Mark was talking about, you always remember the first time that you hear the whisper from God. So I closed the book, and I'm just sitting there staring at the bottom of my bunk, and I'm reflecting back to all the times that I thought it was the meth, but I'm starting to see that it was God. And when I opened up the book, on the inside of the jacket was the inmate's last name, and his last name was Pearson, and mine's Parsons. But if I was selling drugs and didn't want you to know who I was, I always went by Steve Pearson. So that got me on my knees, and I made the promise to God then that whatever time I had left of my life, I would spend serving Him. So I ended up going and doing 30 days in the treatment center. When I got out of there, I went to this place called Outcast. It's a sober motorcycle club. Um, they're AA affiliated. So I only lived about a mile away from that rock that I was telling you about. And my very first IOP group, on the wall in front of me was this post-it note that read "one bite at a time."
Hmm.
Same thing that lady had told me. And when I seen that, I mean, I had God bumps all down me. I was like, all right, man, you're real. I get it. So he started pursuing me. I went out to this. At that time, he was 83 years old. He was a pastor, and him and his wife were CDL truck drivers. And I went out to their house to go swimming in the river one summertime, and I always joke with him. I always say I got tricked into getting baptized, But he ended up baptizing me in the river, and I'm telling you, it was. I mean, God just poured it all over me. When I come up out of that river, I sat there at the riverbank, with an 83-year-old pastor and his wife, and I didn't hold nothing back. I mean, I told them every dirty thing I've done, everything that's ever been done to me, you know. So I Okay, so after I got baptized, that's when I started having to figure out who God was. I had to forget everything that the church ever taught me, because that's religion, that's man made. And I had to experience Him on my own spirituality. So I started taking walks. Mark Batterson says in the book about taking these walks with just God, and so I started taking walks down to that rock. And I'd start asking God. Because He says in the Bible, "Asking it shall be given." So I started testing Him through my faith, and I'd ask Him, send me a female, somebody I could hold hands with, be romantic with, because I seen the city through new eyes. And He put it on my heart that I had a daughter I hadn't seen in 15 years. So I started calling her on these walks and taking pictures along the way, and rebuilding our relationship. And I tell her all the time, man, I wish I could live down here. So fast forward, 9 months later, I was sitting in a hotel room, and I was trying to find a place on Marketplace. I got my license back, right around 6 months. Started working for Domino's, and delivering pizzas, and I was making great money. So I'm in a hotel room, and I'm trying to put all these applications on Marketplace. Over 50 of them, and there's only one place that would return my call, and I'm looking for a place to live. Nobody wanted somebody that has 26 felonies, but the place that called me was this apartment building right across the river from that rock. My prayer room window looked straight out at that rock for about 20 months. Um, so right around 6 months, I got that job at Domino's, and I decided that I was going to go get a bank account, and I was sitting over on North Main Street, right across. My dad has an apartment building over there. He's got 5 units, and it's a big, huge house. And I'm going to River Valley Credit Union, put in my application, and get my bank account open. And I'm sitting there, and I'm looking at my dad's apartment building across the street, and I'm envisioning, Parsons Project Ministries. I'm seeing it. And this is at about 6 months sober. God gave me that vision, and I looked down at my bank folder, and their bank motto was "Dream Big." So I went straight home and I called my realtor friend, and she put me in contact with her mortgage broker. And he says, "Calm down." He says, "You got a long way to go." But he told me that I needed to do X, Y, Z, and I'm telling you, in 2 years' time, during these 2 years, I had a one-bedroom apartment, and my couch always had somebody staying on it. Actually, I've had three people staying in my one-bedroom apartment with me, at one time, and it was just always somebody that was in recovery or somebody that was homeless that I was trying to get into treatment. It was my passion, was to try to pull people out of the darkness. So, so finally, about after 20 months, I finally had a long enough period of employment, and I got my credit score up to a 720. And yeah, I had a little bit of money in the bank, and I went in and applied for a loan for my very first home, and got it. Um, so like during these 18 months that I was there at my apartment, I was going to church at this place called Mosaic, and they started allowing me to use their church band on Wednesday nights for our recovery meeting. And so I would go to sober living houses all over Dayton and pick guys up to take them to church. And then afterwards, I'd ask them, can I use it on Thursday night, and to take them to AA meetings. And I'd always end every night by bringing them by my apartment and sharing my testimony with them, to encourage them to, that sobriety does work, that you can become somebody. So by then, there'd be like 2 months, 3 months to go by, and like my church would call me. They'd be like, "Chris, do you still have the van?" Because I've had the van for like 3 months because I go out every single day doing something with people in recovery. So I ended up getting my first house. One other thing was that congestive heart failure. That's a disease that progressively gets worse. So about 18 months after being sober, I went in, and my cardiologist said, we aren't hearing the same thing that we've heard before. So they sent me in to have another echocardiogram done, and they called me at 11:30 at night to give me the news. And they said, "Chris," they said, "this is nothing that we've done. It's nothing short of a miracle, but my heart functions have returned to normal." She was telling me that I have a full life expectancy. And yeah, I'm telling you, that was like, it hit home. Because God promises us in Joel chapter 2 verse 25 that He'll restore the years that the locusts have eaten. If you just turn to Him, give your life to Him, and He will give it back to you in abundance.
I love
So
that story. I was hoping you wouldn't miss that because I know we had talked about that before when we had met each other. So I
the
was hoping,
congestive heart failure,
yeah, I was hoping you wouldn't skip over that
right?
to let people know. I mean, the three words that come to my mind when listening to you is forgiveness, redemption, and purpose. Because you asked for forgiveness, and although you went about punishing yourself, you know, um, you still asked for forgiveness, and then you had redemption. Like God saved you, and He, redeemed you, and you are a new life.
Yes, ma'am.
You're a new creature, and from all of that, He gave you a purpose.
I love that word because a friend of mine, she's a Christian lady. She just got me. Actually, she got all my guys at my house. I got six. There's six of us, counting myself, that live here at my house. And she bought all of us matching hoodies this year, and it says "created for purpose on a It says "created on purpose for a purpose." Yeah,
Exactly. And
yeah,
even through my life, I've shared with you, you know, God doesn't want us to go through bad things. We have a free will, we're allowed to do whatever we want to do. And if bad stuff happens, it's not that He wants that to happen, but to His glory, if we turn our mindset and turn our eyes on Him, He can take all that bad stuff and make it a purpose for
I'm
our
telling
life.
you, there's absolutely nothing in my life that is worth ever sticking another needle in my arm. He gives me so much joy, so much happiness.
Yeah,
I have bad things happen to me. It's life, it's going to happen. But man, for me to acceptance, forgiveness, and all that,
yeah,
it will bring joy every time.
I love
There's
that.
nothing you can do to take my smile off my face today.
I
Yeah.
love that. And I have only talked to you twice now, but I can tell you have the peace, and you're wanting to take all of that and help other people, which as we're winding down brings me to your nonprofit, which I want you to know I'm so very proud of you. You know, I don't know how many people tell you that in a day. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. I'm telling you because I think that, you know, if unfortunately in this world, um, drugs are very available.
Yeah.
And you can, here's a caveat though, you can become addicted to anything, honestly. But in your case, unfortunately, they're readily available. And you are such an encouragement and inspiration to other people who may be going through the same thing that you went through. And they
Yeah.
can see in you how you've turned your life around. And that's the same for me. You know, God's given me this purpose because of everything I went through. Now I'm here saying there is hope. And that's what you're portraying to everyone. There is hope
There is.
for your addiction after everything. When you're brought to your knees, turn your eyes to God, and He's your hope. Your life can be better. And I love that about you. I definitely want you to tell everyone about Parsons Ministries because it is a 501c3. It is a
Yes.
nonprofit. So if you could tell everyone just in the few minutes we have left, kind of like what you do, how you help other men, and we will definitely put the information in the bio in case anyone wants to get
Okay.
to a Christian nonprofit.
Yeah. So right now I work as a peer supporter. I go out and help people through their journey of recovery. But something else that I love to do, and I do as much as I can as long as the funds are there. And that's I love going back out into the community. I love going out to the homeless community.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we've got a pretty large community right now. I go out and hand out hand warmers, pizzas, you know, just anything that they may need. Hats, scarves, gloves. My mom, she hand crochets these hand scarves, and then she writes a tag on it that says this scarf was made with love and prayer. I love going down the street and seeing my homeless guys out there with the scarf on. I mean,
Oh,
it really warms my heart.
bless your mom's heart. I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I mean, that's how I got mine.
I
Yeah,
love that. Well,
yeah,
and like I said, I don't know what the homeless population or the ratio is in Dayton. It's a large city, so I'm sure there's quite a large population of homeless people. But just to have one person, you may be that one person
oh,
who
there's a
might.
team of us out here now.
Well,
Yeah,
that's wonderful. That's wonderful
yeah,
to hear. Because you never know, like one person, if you got one person who could completely turn around that whole area. And you're already doing that. You're bringing men
yes,
into Parsons Ministries and you're helping them. And, I think we had talked before and you said that you have 100% rate, right, of um, helping these men get off drugs and
yeah,
turning their lives around. So
yeah.
that's
I've
amazing.
gotten over 250 people to go into treatment.
That's
Yeah, in the
amazing.
past 3 years. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
amazing.
But I mean, and it all comes back to that one stranger's act of kindness.
Hmm.
If I didn't send her, I mean, I'm pretty sure I'll be dead by now. But
Yeah.
I mean, that's the biggest thing is I feel like we need to break that stigma. If you see a guy sitting there holding a sign, don't think that you give him $5, he's going to go out and get high with it. Do it for God. You know,
Yeah.
I always give them $3. That's enough to get a sandwich and enough to make the dope boy mad. So
Well, and it also goes back to you never know who is fighting a battle. Like outwardly, you see these people homeless or on the streets, so you know they're fighting a battle. But there could be someone who's driving a Cadillac who is fighting a battle that's just as important. And that's where kindness comes into play. Like, even if you're not saying, Jesus loves you and I want to help you, just be kind to them.
yeah,
You know, what's the saying? Kindness is free. You
right,
don't have to give them money. You don't have to, like,
right,
do
yeah,
anything, but give them a kind word and encourage them. I think in this day and age, people need encouragement. They need to know that not everything is the way it looks or feels. There is hope out there. So
that's
I
right.
appreciate you. And I know that you're going to come back and, kind of share where you're at and, tell us a
Yes,
little
miss.
bit more of your story because I know there's so much more to it. But for right now, though, I appreciate everyone joining us for another episode of Soul Hygiene, and we will have Mr. Chris back. And I will definitely put his nonprofit information and his contact information in the bio in case anyone wants to reach out to him or, give to a Christian nonprofit that's helping men get off the streets. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And we will talk soon. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.